Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Chrissy Raywalk, Director of Intercollegiate Athletics at the University of Delaware. One of the things that I appreciate and enjoy most about leadership is that it's a journey, not a destination. It involves lots of different twists and turns, and you need many different types of people to go along with you on your journey in order for it to be successful. So today, I invite you to start your leadership journey with this podcast. Enjoy.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guests today are Coach Danny Rocco. Coach Rocco is the head football coach at University of Delaware. Thanks for joining us, Coach Rocco.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And we're also joined by Coach Glenn Caruso. Coach Caruso should be a familiar voice here on the One Question Leadership Podcast. Coach, we're lucky to have you on again. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be with you. Thanks, Ty.
Now, Coach Rocco, you've been at Delaware, I think 15 seasons. Well, this is your 15th season as a head coach. You were a head coach at Richmond and Liberty prior to Delaware, and you've been in the coaching profession for roughly 35 years. And then Coach Caruso, you're working on 15 years there at University of St. Thomas, 25 years in the coaching profession. You've won a number of conference championships at St. Thomas. And for you, this is the final year playing a Division III schedule, because you guys are moving up to Division I. Gentlemen, I am excited to have you on. You guys are veterans to the profession, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Happy to be here.
Yep. I'll start with you, Coach Caruso. Now, you and I always talk about things like values, culture, about family, and a number of things. But when you're talking about the pandemic, which we're all dealing with, and you're talking about moving a whole football season 2 or 3 months later to the spring, which is a big difference for all of us who have ever been involved with the game of football. Talk to me about keeping the team balanced, right? Because it's a different habit that they've had for all of their careers, and you come into the fall and we're not playing a season. Talk to me a little bit about how you kept the team balanced over the last few months while, other teams around the country were playing football.
Sure, yeah. And, it's obviously tough to do, and part of the imbalance is probably a portion of the education too, right? I mean, I think a lot of people, we all know what the net fallout is of a global pandemic, but let's also recognize there's probably going to be some positive unintended consequences that come from it. And one of those things is figuring out different ways to do things. And, football coaches, all coaches, but especially football coaches are creatures of habit, right? So you like the routine. You like to know when you get to your office and, you park in the same spot and you eat 4 hours and 10 minutes before game time and all that kind of stuff. But I think one of the things that this forced us to do is look at different ways to do things, get creative. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that every coach is going to move forward doing Zoom meetings for position meetings for the next 10 years, but it opened up our eyes. So I think the imbalance and the opportunity to focus more on what has to be done in order for us to grow is probably a positive. I know for us, not playing in the fall allowed us to concentrate on a lot of the other things, the supporting things. We call them enhancement sessions, but we were able to develop freshmen in a way. I mean, it was the first time ever. It's almost like you're starting with a redshirted freshman, even though the guy's not redshirting, right? So trying to collapse a lot of different things into a short period of time. I mean, for a lot of people, Coach Rocco, myself, many others out there, this spring is going to have to serve a lot of different purposes, certainly playing games, but, recruiting's not going to stop, and player development, personal coaching staff development's not going to stop. So it really forced us to maybe have a bit of a larger look at the picture, and maybe things shouldn't be so segmented as we usually do in coaching.
Right. Coach Rocco, talking about balance during the fall as people around you play football, but you're waiting here to start in the spring.
Well, it was challenging. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. There were a lot of moving parts, a lot of variables. I think from our perspective and my perspective, I think there were two things I wanted to be able to do right up front, and that was to offer some sense of consistency of schedule and some element of consistency of messaging. And everything we were doing was remote in the fall. We were making sure that we had a schedule that was very consistent so our student athletes can kind of plan their day and be organized. And then our messages were very consistent. I kind of make light of myself, but we always had a staff meeting before the team meeting. And in our staff meeting the entire fall on Zoom, I went through my presentation, my PowerPoint for the team meeting. And I wanted to make sure that our coaches heard exactly what I was going to say to the team before I said it. And I wanted to make sure that I had an opportunity to say it the way I wanted to say it, because they were hearing so much information from so many different people. I just thought it was really important that they heard a very consistent and clear, concise message from me and from our coaching staff. In doing that, I think we did a nice job of changing up, how the information was presented. We had a number of guest speakers. We had a number of different social media platforms that we utilized during the course of our meetings to offer messages from coaches around the NFL. We had ex-players, Mike Adams and Paul Warlow and Gino Gradkowski are 3 players that played at Delaware that had long NFL careers, and they all got involved in these meetings. But, we're fortunate now to be moving into a different cycle. And we're really excited to get our team together. And actually, Thursday will be the start of our preseason as we get ready for the spring season.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the spring season, which is a real season this year, right? Coach Rocco, you've been in Division I for a while. You've always had some type of spring ball, right? And Coach Caruso, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, spring ball in Division III has something I think some of the coaches have been fighting for, but I don't know if it's ever gotten across that line. So this is fairly new for you, football in the spring, right, Coach?
Yeah, and I'd say it like this. You're exactly right. And I'd even flip it, because what I did in the fall is we conducted fall ball. And that is what my student athletes would reference as spring ball. So they were accustomed to what spring ball looked like. So we took that model when we moved it into the fall and just called it fall ball. Now, it wasn't spot on identical, but the concept was in place. So they kind of had an idea of what we were going to do, how we were going to do it. They could relate to the process. And we ended up having 14 practices instead of 15. But in theory, that played out the same. So our preseason camp, which usually starts in early August, is now beginning here in late January. So we just kind of flipped the calendar a little bit, but we're trying to keep the things that are consistent and the things that they're familiar with, trying to keep those things intact, so they have the ability to associate and to move into these next phases.
Yeah, interesting. Coach Caruso, you mentioned spring ball is new to Division III. Obviously, this is your last Division III schedule, but talk to me about your adjustment in terms of practice and praying in the spring beyond what we've already talked about.
Well, similar to Coach Rocco and flipping the script a little bit, we were able to get more. We got somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 practices, but the biggest thing for us was, like Coach Rocco was saying, to try and draw on the experiences to the best of our ability to make it somewhat consistent or normal. And so for us, we were afforded in Division III, you're afforded a foreign tour rule every 3 years, where we take the team to foreign country, and then you get 20 practices, these types of things. And we were able to draw from that from prior years. But we were very fortunate, just listening to Coach talk, and we're 1,700 miles away probably, but even though you might even be in the same division, or maybe you're in the same league, but if you're in a different state, there's often a lot of differences and adjustments you have to make too. And those two experiences of meeting virtually, meeting in person, were certainly different.
All right, yeah. I wonder, Coach Caruso, that if both of you guys watched this past football season and the basketball season as it ramps up, and there are stops and starts to the season, games postponed, games canceled, players in, players out, players having to sit because of this whole pandemic thing, and preparing for that as the leader, right? Those ups and downs will frustrate any of us, no matter how, for the lack of a better word, zen we are. Those starts and stops would probably be frustrating. So keeping yourself balanced. Talk to me a little bit about, first you, Caruso, about preparing yourself for the possibilities for the ups and downs of the season beyond normal ups and downs of seasons. in terms of possibly players sitting out or games postponed and those types of things?
I think it really magnified some of the core principles that we all teach as coaches. I mean, you go into a game, your halftime speech is never the same that you give, before the speech, right? You have to adjust. This just magnified it and made it that much more. So, Ty, every week is this guy going to come back from his ankle sprain? Is this guy going to be all right to catch the ball? All those types of things. And now it's just even more. So it definitely made us rethink what pods and what groups and who's hanging out with who and who's where, for sure. It put the onus on the players to do the same in the other 22 hours or 21 hours when you're not with them. But that being said, I think we all understand that even when it gets back to normal, it's going to be a different normal than we remember. And that has to be embraced. But I'll leave you with that the simple fact that all of those things that we talk about are really in a spotlight right now and kind of support what we teach as coaches in order to be intuitive and pliable. And that was refreshing.
Yeah, it is. Coach Rocco, anything on that?
Well, there are some great points here, Coach Caruso. I think, poise and patience, these are two words that, are very important in any organization, and any leader's got to be able to show poise and patience in certain moments. And I think these are those moments. And it's very easy to cross those lines, when you're dealing with adversity and unknowns. And since this is the first time for everybody dealing with this type of a pandemic, it's the unknown that you have to kind of be alert for or prepared for. And in doing that, I think you got to demonstrate poise and patience. We've done a nice job here with cross-training our coaches, cross-training our players. And what I mean by that is, multiple players learning different positions, maybe having multiple roles to help fill those voids. And then with our coaches, not really coaching other positions, but spending more time communicating with other positions. And then, at practice, the ability to have different coaches kind of call the practice, knowing that during the game, you might be put in a moment where guys have to do different jobs. And then for myself here, I've spent more time in this cycle than ever, kind of trying to dissect that reality that in a given moment, I might be the offensive play caller. In a given moment, I might be the defensive play caller. In a given moment, I might call the game in the special teams. And, we took all of our game plans as a full staff and we dissected them in such a way that everybody in the room understood, how the game plan was outlined. And if you were looking for something, it's 4th and 1, end of the game, must stop, we can all find the call, here it is, and they know where to go. Just to create more options and variables, just trying to increase the probability of success.
Right. Be pliable, like Coach Caruso just said. I know the athletic director of both of your schools. I know Phil Eston and I know Chrissy Waywalk. And what I know about Chrissy is she is all about internal evaluation and internal preparation for success. Never accept that what looks good on the outside may not mean that everything is good on the inside. And then Coach Phil Eston, he falls back on making sure we have the resources to succeed at what we need to succeed at. And they've both been successful as athletic directors. I wonder if either one of you could talk about the leadership of the athletics director, right? And during the time of pandemic, during the time of delayed seasons, during the time of positive and negative tests and those type of things. Coach Rocco, if you'll start, and then we'll go to Coach Caruso.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great place to interject again, poise and patience, because they're dealing with things that are on a much higher level. Like, being the head football coach has a lot of responsibility. It's a great privilege. It's a great privilege. With that privilege comes responsibility. And we oversee a lot. We make a lot of decisions. But then here's the athletic director having to be able to see all of these sports and support all of these sports and all of our student athletes in so many different ways. And from mental health to strength and conditioning, to practice opportunities, to facility availability to nutrition to academic support. And it just goes on and on and on. And it's like that jigsaw puzzle. You're trying to put it together. And, as the head football coach, I'm trying to do everything in my power, and our staff is trying to do everything in our power that we have our piece ready to go. And as we're getting closer and closer, we're just kind of following her leadership, the leadership of our athletic department, our school president. And when we get a chance to step into that moment, it's our job to be ready.
All right, Coach Caruso, there's been a lot of figuring out, I guess, right, between what you guys are doing, making the jump to Division I, and then now you got this pandemic. I'm sure you and Phil's relationship has grown in the short time he's been there, 1.5, 2 years. I can't remember exactly how long it is, but talk a little bit about
2 years. Yep. Yeah. What's interesting to me about it is, look, we all understand that we have to pivot. And usually when we do, it's from something we want to do into something that we don't want to do, but we need to do. And one of the several things I saw about Phil's leadership, it's Phil. Phil did an amazing job. And so did our other athletic directors, guys like, Jamal Griffin, Corey Chapman, trying to figure out, okay, we were planning on playing games and figuring out how you put X amount of people in a stadium and doing all these things. And in an instant, it turned to a lot of those things that Coach Rocco is suggesting. How do we best support the student athletes, right? And if you think about, that's the nature of all of our jobs, right? But then when the lens of the support, usually supporting on game day, is going to look totally different than supporting, in a pandemic. And I think the chance for Phil to be able to recognize, identify, and pivot is huge. The other thing is, with so many targets moving, yes, being in a global pandemic, without a doubt, that's different. Going from Division III to Division I, there's no roadmap for that, right? And then on top of that, I'm trying to look at it through my lens. And to Danny's point, you look at what Phil has to do. Not only is he doing that times 21 sports, but, I've been here 13 years and he's just getting his staff in place, the cultural tenets. So the amount of adjusting that had to be done is something that I think I could do this for another 25 years. And I don't know if we're going to have to quite be this pliable. I hope not anyway, but trying to, something that I gain a lot of, faith or confidence in watching Phil, is setting up a structure that can be scaled out to an entire department, and then having the belief and the confidence that knowing that each coach is going to paint his picture or, fill that space in his own way. And that balance of doing that in these times is something that I think is admirable, to say the least.
It is. And speaking on both of them and both of you, we all try to operate from a place of either purpose, a place of values, a place of non-negotiables, a place of whatever core principles we use to be able to succeed in the things we do throughout life. And you talk about motivation and staying focused and culture and leadership in general. I wonder over the past 10 months to a year how your core principles have probably been challenged, right? I mean, this thing is different, right? It's something different we're dealing with. And you guys talk about pull, you talk about being pliable. Are there any of your core principles that have been challenged? And then are there any that have been strengthened? And talk to me about handling the challenges or the strengthening between those two. I guess, Coach Rocco, if you want to step in there.
Yeah, Ty, I tell you, what a great question. And it's kind of really at the crux, I think, of what we're all trying to manage and navigate. And, every year since I've been a head coach, this is year 15, I have a program called Winning with Character and Team Unity. It's basically a character education program. And every year I focus on maybe a different theme, a different area of character development. Quite often it's a book. And kind of prior to pandemic, made a decision that this year we were going to focus on the power of the positive and grit and perseverance. And it's a book by Angela Duckworth. And it was fascinating. And as we got into February, then March and April, I'm saying, I've got the right book. This is the right book. And our staff and our student athletes did a great job with being able to look at these principles and the importance of the positive and the power of positivity, and then the importance of being able to persevere and understanding that hard work is more valuable than talent, and the reality that, showing grit in those tough times, knowing that these things were around the corner. So I think our team was served really well by that. And it was really interesting because when I brought in, again, Mike Adams played 16 years plus or minus in the NFL. He's a safety, just retired this past year. Paul Warlow had been in the league 6, 7, 8 years. Gino Gradkowski. These are all Delaware grads that were in the NFL. I brought them back to talk to the team, and they said, "Coach, what do you want me to talk about?" And I said, I've been talking to my team about the power of the positive and then grit. And they all said to a man, "Oh, by Angela Duckworth." I said, "Yeah, that book, Grit." And they said, "We've been there, we've read it, and we're familiar with the value of that book." So it was spot on, and I think it really helped a lot of our players, a lot of our student athletes kind of stay in the fight, and withstand some of these distractions.
Right, which is very important. Coach Caruso, you talk about core principles being challenged or strengthened during the past 10 months to a year.
Yeah, both of them tested. And Coach Rocco, I'll add Rich Gannon to that list. Maybe he's a guy that is well. He lives right down the road, great man and great leader of men as well. And, being able to bring different voices in, I think is something that was so important. So it wasn't just the same coach all the time. But there are things, you're right, Ty, there are things that they test us, they challenge us. But if you are looking at it positively, they either confirm or deny the fact that what you're saying is being heard or taught. And, we can all have our PowerPoints on day one when the guys arrive and have all the ideals and ideas that we want to hold up: belief, accountability, sacrifice, and deadness and character. But instead of those being applied in a way that, I'm going to fit my C gap so my safety can fit my D gap, it's just applied in a different medium, and that's where the thing that I enjoyed the most was watching and being a part of a family, a team who, needs and wants are a big deal to us. And when a 22-year-old kid comes and sits in that leather chair right there and he says, "Hey, Coach, I stop him. And I say, whoa, son, are we talking about what you need or what you want? And are we just getting them confused?" And I think it forced everybody to focus on my brother's needs are more important than my wants. And as we all know, in any family, it's not genetic. It doesn't follow a bloodline. Until everybody's needs come before anybody's wants, you can't call yourself a family, not in the right sense of the word, in my opinion. And so it tested that, and it showed, I think, the depth and the breadth of these student athletes that aren't just trying to catch a touchdown pass or trying to sack the quarterback, right? It showed a human side. And, I'm just listening to Coach Rocco talk about his staff meetings and crossing over the coaches. And doesn't mean I'm going to ask my O-line coach to teach a 5-step drop, right?
Right.
The more that we can know each other, know what our hot button issues are, understand the place that we come from, the more likely we are to serve each other's needs. And even though neither of us scored a point this fall, I think if you look at it through that lens, it's a big win.
I worked for a long time at the American Football Coaches Association, and this time, probably 8 to 10 years ago, the whole country is at arms about, is the game of football necessary, right? Mm-hmm. But pandemic started, and I think most of the conversation, especially in college athletics, was how can we make sure we play this game because of how important it is. Obviously, there's revenue implications, which I don't even know were affected this year, right? Because nobody's in the stands type thing, but how important it is for this game to be played. And now we're talking about a spring football season. And I think you guys agree that while football will probably get back to the fall, the approach to the game will probably be a lot different based on the things we've learned over the last 10 months. And with that being said, I really appreciate the information you guys have shared. And I really appreciate you guys joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Happy to be with you.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
That was Coach Danny Rocco. He's the head football coach at University of Delaware. And Coach Glenn Caruso is the head football coach at University of St. Thomas. And, of course, I'm Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, The role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.